At 09:22 a.m. on August 17th, 1943, over the dense pine forests of northern France, the sky shudders under the roar of a Daimler-Benz DB605 engine. Oberleutnant Armin Faber, his heart pounding against his chest, banks hard to the left, his Messerschmitt Bf-109 G6 shaking violently under him. The radio crackles, faint and static-ridden. "Get down here, Faber. You've got damage," his squadron leader's voice yells through the interference. A flash of orange. Tracer rounds streak by, narrowly missing his starboard wing. A jagged spark of metal bursts from the engine cowling as the aircraft lurches. His left aileron is gone, control surfaces shredded. He grits his teeth, shuddering as the controls slip from his grasp. This isn't a normal engagement anymore. His mind races. Emergency landing? Bail out? The ground looms closer, but then he sees it. An open field near Amiens. A makeshift opportunity. The Messerschmitt hits the dirt, skids violently through wet earth, and comes to a halt. In the chaos of war, something extraordinary just happened. He's alive. But his aircraft, carrying modifications reserved for Jagdgeschwader Command, is about to change hands. By mid-morning on August 17th, 1943, over the skies of northern France near Amiens, Oberleutnant Armin Faber feels the vibrations of his Messerschmitt Bf-109 G6 under his fingertips, the hum of the Daimler-Benz engine, producing 1,475 horsepower at combat throttle, keeps him in rhythm with the thermal currents rising from the farmland below. But today feels different. The constant grind of the war, 3 years of sorties, 217 combat hours logged, has caught up with him. Even the calm before engagement weighs heavy against his chest. His squadron leader's orders crackle through the few G16ZY radio. A reconnaissance escort mission, flying deep into contested airspace to cover a photo reconnaissance Bf-110. An assignment too routine for a fighter ace credited with 11 confirmed kills. But in this moment, it's an unspoken truth among Luftwaffe pilots. Every mission could be the last. Attrition rates for Jagdgeschwader units in France had reached 18% monthly by summer 1943, according to Luftflotte 3 operational summaries. The sun beats down on the horizon as Faber cuts through cumulus clouds at 4,000 meters, the cockpit growing warmer despite the altitude. The wind outside screams past at 450 kilometers per hour. There's no time to think of anything other than the task. Maintain formation, scan for contacts, preserve fuel. His grip tightens on the control column, his thumb idly checking the radio frequency selector. And then, a flash of light reflected off canopy glass. Enemy fighters, likely P-47 Thunderbolts, diving from the sun. A split second to react. Gunfire stitches across his wingman's fuselage. A sudden blast of return fire from Faber's own MG-131 machine guns. Records later showed the engagement lasted 93 seconds. For Faber, it felt eternal. His engine takes hits. Coolant temperature spikes. The Messerschmitt shudders, losing power, and Faber knows he has perhaps 3 minutes of flight time remaining before catastrophic failure. At 08:34 a.m. that same morning, across a secret forward air base in Normandy, designated Einsatzhafen Süder 12, ground crewmen moved in choreographed haste. They checked over freshly fueled Bf-109 G6 fighters, each loaded with 210 rounds per MG, 151-20 cannon, the whir of starter motors, the clanging of tools against hardened steel, sounds that had become routine over 18 months of continuous operations. Mechanics worked in shifts, 12 hours on, 6 hours rest. It had been the same for months. Fuel, arm, fly, repair, repeat. But not this particular Tuesday. Something was different about Faber's aircraft. Lena Hartmann, a civilian engineer contracted from Messerschmitt AG's Regensburg works, watched Faber's Schwarm, his flight of 4, take off from the eastern perimeter. She noticed something unusual during pre-flight inspection an hour earlier. The Messerschmitt assigned to Faber, Werknummer 16438, seemed fitted with non-standard avionics. Her hands had fumbled as she checked the technical documentation against the physical installation. "This isn't standard configuration," she muttered under her breath, eyes fixed on the tail markings. White chevron with double bars, indicating Staffelkapitan status. But the aircraft itself was marked for testing purposes in faded stencil. It was a newer variant, a G6AS model, she recognized from internal memoranda, fitted with the experimental GM1 nitrous oxide boost system intended for high-altitude interception, one reserved for evaluation units and Geschwader command staff. The technical order specified maximum 20 aircraft of this type deployed to frontline squadrons by August 1943. Production records from Messerschmitt confirmed only 16 delivered to Western Front units by mid-month. If Faber's aircraft went down intact, Lena realized, Allied intelligence would gain access to propulsion modifications still classified as Geheime Kommandosache, top secret command matter. The GM1 system alone could reveal German efforts to counter high-altitude American bomber formations. She logged her observation in the maintenance Bordbuch, but said nothing aloud. In war, engineers documented, commanders decided. At 10:00 a.m., over French countryside, 5 kilometers northwest of Amiens, Armin Faber's Messerschmitt began its uncontrolled descent. As the aircraft dropped through 2,000 meters, trailing smoke from punctured coolant lines, it was all he could do to maintain enough airspeed for controlled flight. His body braced against the harness as the plane shook, engine vibrations increasing with each passing second. Airspeed indicator, 320 kilometers per hour and falling. Altitude, 1,000 meters. Oil, pressure, nearly zero. With a sickening lurch, the Daimler-Benz engine seized completely. Sudden silence except for wind noise. He spotted it below. A harvested wheat field, perhaps 400 meters long, bordered by hedgerows. Not ideal, but survivable. Faber committed to the approach, lowering flaps manually when hydraulic pressure failed, aiming for the flattest section visible. The Messerschmitt touched down hard, left main gear collapsing immediately. The aircraft slewed sideways, tearing through stubble and soft earth, the right wing digging in. Metal shrieked against stone. The canopy frame buckled but held. With a final grinding halt, the fuselage came to rest at a 15-degree angle, nose down, 40 meters from a tree line. Faber was alive, barely conscious. His left shoulder had impacted the canopy frame during the final impact. His ribs ached from harness compression, but his mind cleared within seconds. The cockpit smelled of hot metal, leaking fuel and scorched rubber. Smoke curled from the engine compartment, white and acrid. He had perhaps 2 minutes before fire or discovery. His gaze flickered across the instrument panel. Scattered glass, bent needles, but the Reeve gun sight remained intact. Through the cracked windscreen he saw movement. A tree line, maybe 300 meters distant, and beyond that, figures in khaki uniforms. American infantry patrols operating in this sector, according to briefings, numbered approximately 2 companies from the 1st Infantry Division, conducting forward reconnaissance ahead of general advance operations. Faber's first thought, destroy the aircraft. His second, impossible. The Messerschmitt was too important, too intact. No one could know the modifications it carried. Yet the wreckage was undeniable, visible from air and ground. Within minutes, those American soldiers would reach him. At 10:45 a.m., First Lieutenant Charles Wheeler's boots crunched against turned earth and wheat stubble as he approached the wreckage. The Messerschmitt's twisted airframe reflected sunlight that seemed too bright for the gravity of the moment. Wheeler, assigned to S2 Intelligence Section, 16th Infantry Regiment, had received reports of the crash from forward observers at 10:17 a.m. His squad was already photographing the site, making field sketches of the airframe configuration and damage pattern. A technical sergeant named Davis ran over, notebook in hand, voice kept deliberately low. "Lieutenant, this is significant. The engine cowling markings indicate G-series, but the supercharger intake configuration doesn't match our recognition manuals. There are additional systems I don't recognize." Wheeler examined the fuselage more closely. The aircraft bore standard Luftwaffe crosses and fuselage codes, but stenciled documentation visible through the damaged cowling showed Erprobungsstaffel notations, testing squadron designations. The tail assembly, though damaged, remained largely intact. Control surface mechanisms appeared more refined than standard production models his briefings had covered. This wasn't just another downed fighter. According to 8th Air Force intelligence summaries, fewer than 30 intact or near-intact German aircraft had been captured on the Western Front since 1940. Most were destroyed by their pilots or rendered useless by combat damage. Wheeler looked toward the tree line where his men had found the pilot, conscious, injured, but mobile, already secured and waiting for medical evacuation and interrogation transport. The German had made no attempt to sabotage his aircraft. Whether from injury, shock, or calculation, the result was the same. They didn't just have a downed enemy fighter. They had a technical intelligence windfall. It wasn't just Faber's operational failure. It was a strategic opportunity measured in months of potential advantage. If the aircraft contained systems not yet encountered in combat analysis, Wheeler ordered his radio man to contact regiment headquarters. By 11:05 a.m., coded transmission confirmed. Secure site, await technical intelligence team from Nyack Air Force Service Command. Maintain perimeter security. Photograph all markings and serial numbers before moving wreckage. At 11:20 a.m., inside the canvas-walled command tent of regimental headquarters, Wheeler reviewed the preliminary technical report with Captain Harold Stevens, the regiment's senior intelligence officer. Sergeant Davis, who had worked as an aviation mechanic before the war, delivered his assessment with careful precision. "Sir, we've documented non-standard installations. The boost system appears supplementary to normal supercharging, possibly emergency power augmentation. The radio equipment includes frequency ranges we haven't seen in captured few G-sets, and the engine itself, while damaged, shows modification to the accessory drive section." Stevens studied the photographs spread across the map table. Each image showed different angles, fuselage codes, damaged wing sections, engine compartment details, cockpit instrumentation. One photograph captured the data plate near the cockpit. Werk number 16438, built at Regensburg Works, delivered May 1943. "The Air Force technical intelligence people will want this intact," Stevens said quietly. "Every component catalogued. We've never encountered this variant in complete form before." Wheeler understood the implication. Standard procedure called for destruction of enemy equipment that couldn't be immediately evacuated, but this aircraft represented something different. Potential insight into German aviation development, propulsion systems, operational capabilities. There was a problem, though. The German pilot, Oberleutnant Faber, remained alive and conscious. Medical staff reported minor injuries, shoulder contusion, possible rib fracture, abrasions, but nothing critical. He could communicate. He possessed technical knowledge of the aircraft systems, operational doctrine, perhaps strategic intelligence about Luftwaffe deployment in northern France. Wheeler felt the weight of competing priorities. His mission: gather intelligence, secure materiel, prevent enemy recovery operations. But there was something uncomfortable about a living enemy officer in custody, knowing his aircraft would be dismantled, studied, potentially copied. "What about the pilot?" Wheeler asked. Stevens glanced at the status report. "Prisoner of war, standard protocols, interrogation by specialized personnel, then transfer to appropriate POW facility. But that's separate from the aircraft recovery operation." Separate, Wheeler thought, but connected by one man's navigational error or mechanical failure, recorded as combat damage in the initial report, but the truth would emerge through investigation. By noon, 9 Air Force technical teams were en route. The intelligence machinery had begun turning. At 12:10 p.m., in a converted storage room serving as temporary interrogation facility, Oberleutnant Armin Faber sat in a wooden chair, hands secured. His uniform, torn at the shoulder and stained with hydraulic fluid, still bore the rank insignia and Geschwader badges. His eyes showed fatigue, but maintained focus, pupils responsive, awareness intact despite the trauma of the crash. The interrogator, a captain from Corps G2 intelligence staff who spoke fluent German, leaned forward across the small table. The room was quiet except for the muffled sounds of camp activity outside. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting flat illumination. "Tell us about the aircraft," the captain said in German, voice professionally neutral. "Its designation, modifications, operational purpose." Faber stared back without immediate response. His mind assessed the situation with the same tactical calculation he applied in combat. They had his fighter. They would dismantle it, measure every component, analyze every system. His knowledge, his testimony, might accelerate their understanding, or might provide context they couldn't otherwise obtain. The interrogator waited. Standard technique: allow silence to build pressure. Observe reactions. Note what the prisoner chooses to protect versus what he offers. Faber understood the game, but he also understood the mathematics of his situation. The aircraft was lost. Destroyed, it would have yielded debris and fragments. Intact, it would yield complete technical intelligence. His silence wouldn't change that outcome. What he knew, the GM-1 boost system was experimental, intended for high-altitude interception profiles against B-17 formations. The few G-16ZY radio provided extended-range communication for command coordination. The aircraft was one of fewer than 20 deployed with these modifications. What the Americans would discover anyway, all of it, through examination and testing. The silence stretched 40 seconds, measured by the wall clock. Then Faber spoke. Not defiance, not collaboration, simply acknowledgement of reality. "Messerschmitt Bf 109 Gustav 6, he said in clear German. "Nitrous oxide boost system for high-altitude operation. You'll find the technical documentation in the fuselage storage compartment if it survived the crash." The interrogator showed no reaction, but noted the response. The breakthrough came not from pressure, but from Faber's recognition that the aircraft had already told its story. He was simply confirming what engineers would inevitably discover. At 03:30 p.m., the ground trembled slightly as a convoy of 6x6 trucks and a specialized recovery trailer arrived at the crash site perimeter. The wind carried the smell of disturbed earth and aviation fuel. Personnel from the 15th Air Force Technical Intelligence Detachment began systematic documentation, measuring, photographing, cataloguing every component before disassembly. Captain James Morrison, the lead technical intelligence officer, established a mobile laboratory in a requisition barn 400 meters from the wreckage. His team included 3 aviation engineers, 2 German-speaking technical specialists, and 4 mechanics trained in enemy aircraft systems. They worked with methodical efficiency. The first priority: remove the GM-1 boost system intact. The installation consisted of a pressurized tank containing nitrous oxide, injection plumbing into the supercharger intake, and a cockpit control system. Morrison's team photographed the system from 12 angles before carefully disconnecting fuel and electrical lines. The second priority: document the engine modifications. The Daimler-Benz DB605 AS variant showed higher compression ratio components and revised accessory gearing. Serial numbers were recorded. Engine number 946382, manufactured March 8, 1943 at Daimler-Benz Stuttgart unter Turkheim Works. By 05:15 p.m., the team had created a complete photographic record, 237 images on 35mm film, plus detailed technical sketches. The propeller assembly, though damaged, revealed variable pitch mechanisms that matched reports from other captured aircraft. The gun installations: 2 13mm AMG 131 machine guns and 1 20mm AMG 151 Pogue 20 cannon, were standard for late production G-series variants, but the real question loomed over every measurement, every annotation. Could American industry replicate or counter these systems? Morrison wrote in his preliminary assessment, transmitted to Wright Field Technical Intelligence Center by 07:00 p.m. Subject aircraft represents current German high-altitude fighter development. Boost system provides estimated 300 additional horsepower for 10-15 minute duration. Implications for bomber defense operations significant. Recommend immediate detailed analysis and possible integration into U.S. fighter development programs. From his guarded transport awaiting transfer to Corps level detention facility, Faber could hear the sounds of disassembly, metal against metal, voices calling technical specifications, the organized dismantling of his aircraft. He had handed them more than a fighter. He had provided a reference point for understanding German aviation strategy in late 1943. The consequence was measurable, knowledge that would inform Allied fighter tactics and development for the remainder of the war. By August 19, 1943, 2 days after the crash, at Allied Expeditionary Air Force Tactical Headquarters in southern England, a tense silence filled the briefing room as American fighter squadron commanders reviewed the intelligence summary. The information had traveled quickly. Field reports to Corps G2, then to Army Air Force Intelligence, finally to operational planning staff. There was a new element in play. Not a weapon, but knowledge, understanding of how the Luftwaffe was adapting to strategic bombing campaigns. The Messerschmitt represented a documented response to Allied high-altitude bomber operations. Colonel Robert Harrison, commanding the 78th Fighter Group, studied the technical photographs. His P-47 Thunderbolt squadrons had engaged Bf-109 G-series fighters multiple times over France and Germany, but none of the encounters suggested boost-augmented performance at altitudes above 7,000 meters. If they're deploying nitrous systems to frontline units, Harrison said, reviewing Morrison's assessment, we need to adjust our escort tactics. The performance advantage we rely on at altitude becomes marginal. Our intelligence major added context. Right field analysis suggests fewer than 50 aircraft modified to this standard by August 1943. Production limitations, nitrous oxide supply, specialized components, restrict widespread deployment. But operational testing indicates the Germans are refining high-altitude interception doctrine. The engineers at Wright Field had already begun comparative studies. Could the GM-1 concept be adapted to American engines? The Pratt & Whitney R2800 powering the P-47 already included turbocharging for altitude performance. Adding chemical boost seemed redundant. But the principle, emergency power augmentation for critical engagement phases, had merit. The new prototype wasn't a copy of the Messerschmitt. It was an informed evolution of American fighter design, incorporating lessons from German engineering philosophy. For Faber, now processed through initial interrogation and transferred to a prisoner of war facility in England, the consequence of his forced landing was becoming clear through prisoner communication networks. Allied intelligence had gained complete access to advanced Luftwaffe technology. His aircraft, once his primary weapon, was now informing enemy tactical development. But in the larger arithmetic of war, there was something else. A quiet understanding that individual actions, whether deliberate or accidental, rippled through strategic calculations. One aircraft, one pilot, one moment of mechanical failure. The variables compounded into intelligence value measured in months of operational advantage. The brief ended with updated engagement protocols for bomber escort missions. The war continued, informed by one pilot's survival and one aircraft's capture. By November 1943, 3 months after Faber's crash, at the Royal Aircraft Establishment's enemy aircraft flight test facility in Farnborough, England, the reassembled Messerschmitt Bf-109G6 sat in a secured hangar. British and American technical personnel had spent 12 weeks analyzing every system, measuring, testing, documenting. The aircraft had been restored to flight-worthy condition using salvaged components and manufactured replacements. Test pilot Captain Eric Brown, RAF, conducted the first flight on November 7th at 09:40 hours. Duration 37 minutes. The flight test report noted handling characteristics, control response at various speeds and altitudes, and performance with the GM1 boost system activated. Brown's assessment, filed November 8th. Aircraft demonstrates excellent rate of climb and maneuverability at combat weights. Boost system provides significant performance increase above 6,500 meters altitude, but operational duration limited to approximately 12 minutes before system depletion. Visibility from cockpit adequate but inferior to Allied bubble canopy designs. Control forces moderate throughout flight envelope. The intelligence value extended beyond flight characteristics. Metallurgical analysis of engine components revealed German manufacturing techniques and material compositions. Avionics examination provided insight into Luftwaffe communication frequencies and coding systems. Even small details, cockpit layout, instrument calibration, gun sight design, contributed to comprehensive understanding of German aviation engineering philosophy. Colonel Morrison's final technical intelligence report, distributed to Army Air Force Materiel Command in December 1943, ran to 143 pages with supporting photographs and engineering drawings. Key findings emphasized that German fighter development prioritized altitude performance and firepower over range and pilot visibility. The strategic implication, American fighter design, should maintain emphasis on pilot situational awareness, extended range for bomber escort missions, and ruggedness for sustained operations. But the most significant outcome wasn't replication, it was informed counter-development. Understanding the Messerschmitt's strengths allowed American designers to emphasize different characteristics: the P-51 Mustang's range, the P-47's high-altitude performance, the P-38's twin-engine reliability. For Faber, the victory, if the term applied, remained distant. He was prisoner 847GB, held at POW Camp 186 in Lancashire. News reached prisoners Through sanitized camp bulletins, Allied air superiority increasing over Europe, strategic bombing campaigns intensifying, fighter losses on both sides mounting, his aircraft bearing RAF roundels and the marking TP plus MCO for technical evaluation flew again. A symbol not of German engineering captured, but of intelligence turned operational. The tides were shifting, measured in documented performance data and strategic adjustments informed by one intact fighter. By January 1944, 5 months after the August crash, at Luftwaffe Command Center in Berlin-Wannsee, intelligence summaries painted an increasingly difficult picture. American fighter capabilities were expanding, not through revolutionary designs, but through incremental improvements informed by comprehensive understanding of German systems. Oberst Wilhelm Herget, analyzing Allied air operations reports from Western Front units, noted a troubling pattern. American P-51 Mustangs were appearing in greater numbers over Germany, escorting bomber formations previously beyond fighter range. Their tactics suggested detailed knowledge of Bf-109 performance limitations, engagement profiles designed to exploit altitude bands where German fighters lost advantage, forcing combat at altitudes where supercharger efficiency declined. The Americans had learned. Captured aircraft, interrogated pilots, technical analysis, all contributed to their operational adjustments, and Faber's aircraft, specifically, had provided a data point. Luftwaffe intelligence had reconstructed the incident through prisoner reports and field communications intercepts. 1. Bf-109G6AS, intact, transferred to Allied technical evaluation. The GM-1 system, radio equipment, engine modifications, all compromised. Herget's assessment, recorded in operational summary dated January 23, 1944. Enemy fighter tactics demonstrate comprehensive understanding of our performance envelope. Altitude advantage previously enjoyed by boost-equipped aircraft now systematically countered by revised escort formations. Recommend accelerated development of next-generation interceptor designs. But development required time, resources, manufacturing capacity, all increasingly constrained by strategic bombing campaigns targeting German industrial facilities. The Luftwaffe's response, tactical adaptations, revised interception procedures, concentration of remaining resources on defense of critical targets, but these were reactive measures, responses to Allied initiatives informed by captured German technology. The mathematics were unfavorable. According to Luftwaffe loss reports for January 1944, fighter attrition exceeded replacement rates by 17%. Pilot training hours had been reduced to preserve fuel stocks. Experienced pilots like Faber, lost to capture or combat, couldn't be easily replaced. In the midst of strategic calculations, Faber remained a statistical entry. One pilot, prisoner of war, intelligence value extracted. His fate, like thousands of others, would be determined by larger outcomes, front movements, diplomatic negotiations, the eventual conclusion of the conflict. But his small contribution to Allied intelligence, unintentional, the result of mechanical failure and navigation error, had compounded into measurable advantage, not decisive by itself, but part of the accumulated knowledge that informed Allied air superiority. The war had shifted. The careful documentation of one aircraft had revealed principles that extended across entire fighter development programs. And somewhere in the archives, Morrison's technical report continued informing engineering decisions and tactical planning. By March 1944, 7 months after his crash landing, Armin Faber was prisoner 847 GB at POW Camp 186, a converted industrial facility outside Manchester. The camp held 372 German prisoners. Luftwaffe aircrew, Army personnel captured in North Africa, naval ratings from U-boat crews. The daily routine was monotonous. Morning roll call, work details, limited recreation, evening count. Faber had been interrogated 3 times beyond the initial field questioning. Once by RAF intelligence specialists seeking operational details about Jagdgeschwader tactics, once by technical officers with specific questions about the GM-1 boost system, and once by a joint Anglo-American team investigating Luftwaffe order of battle in France. He had provided what seemed reasonable, unit designations already known through radio intercepts, general tactical doctrine documented in captured manuals, confirmation of facts Allied intelligence had likely already established. What he withheld, names of specific personnel, details of upcoming operations he'd been briefed on before his final mission, assessment of German morale and supply situations, but the interrogations had ceased by December 1943. The intelligence value of one pilot, one crashed aircraft, had been extracted. In the camp, news arrived slowly. Through censored letters, occasional camp newspapers printed in German under Allied supervision. Conversations with newly arrived prisoners. The war was not going well for Germany. Allied forces were advancing in Italy. Soviet offensives were pushing westward. Strategic bombing continued intensifying over German cities and industrial centers. Faber understood his position in the larger narrative. He was just another soldier, one of millions caught in the machinery of industrial warfare. His capture had been accident, mechanical failure, perhaps compounded by navigation error in the chaos of combat. His aircraft had been valuable to the enemy, but wars weren't decided by single technical intelligence captures. Yet there was a quiet recognition among the prisoners that each small failure accumulated. One aircraft revealed secrets. One pilot couldn't return to operations. One unit was short one experienced aviator. Multiply those individual losses across thousands of incidents, and the aggregate became strategically significant. The day ended as most did, with the sound of boots on, concrete, guards conducting evening count, prisoners returning to barracks. Faber's fate, like so many others, would be determined by events far beyond his control or influence. His legacy was already written in technical reports and intelligence files. The individual moment, one Messerschmitt, one forced landing, had been absorbed into the vast documentation of the war. Nothing was ever truly personal in conflicts measured by millions of participants. By June 1945, nearly 2 years after Faber's capture, in Washington, D.C., at Army Air Forces headquarters, a final assessment report synthesized lessons learned from enemy aircraft technical intelligence operations. The war in Europe had ended May 8th. The Pacific War continued. The Messerschmitt program, the systematic capture, analysis, and evaluation of German aircraft, had contributed to Allied air superiority through incremental advantage. Not revolutionary discoveries, but steady accumulation of knowledge that informed tactics, training, and equipment development. According to the AAF summary, between 1943 and 1945, 37 German aircraft were captured intact or substantially complete on the Western Front. Each provided specific technical intelligence. Collectively, they revealed German aviation industry capabilities, resource limitations, and design priorities. Faber's Bf-109 G6, captured August 17, 1943, was referenced as subject aircraft TPMK in multiple intelligence reports. Its contribution, first complete examination of GM-1 boost system in operational configuration, confirmation of Luftwaffe high-altitude interceptor development, baseline data for comparative performance assessment against American fighters. The aircraft itself had been scrapped in late 1944 after serving its intelligence purpose. Components were distributed to various research facilities. The engine was sectioned for metallurgical study. The boost system was preserved at Wright Field for reference, but the knowledge persisted. In reports, in tactical manuals, in the accumulated expertise of intelligence personnel who would carry those lessons into post-war aviation development. Faber, once an instrument of Luftwaffe offensive operations, had become an unintentional contributor to Allied victory, not through defection or collaboration, but through the accident of circumstance. One mechanical failure, one forced landing, one intact aircraft. The strategic calculus was clear in retrospect. Air superiority had been achieved through industrial production, pilot training, tactical innovation, and intelligence. Each element reinforced the others. Captured aircraft provided data. Data informed development. Development produced better equipment and tactics. Better equipment enabled operational success. In the final accounting, victories weren't attributed to individual incidents. They were measured in aggregate. Total sorties flown, bombs delivered, enemy aircraft destroyed, industrial targets neutralized. But historians would note that intelligence operations, including technical analysis of captured equipment, contributed measurably to shortened conflict duration and reduced Allied casualties. Faber's aircraft represented one data point among thousands. Its significance lay not in individual impact, but in systematic contribution to comprehensive understanding of enemy capabilities. The legacy was documented in archive boxes, technical drawings, test reports, and operational summaries that would inform aviation development for decades. By September 1945, the war had ended. Germany surrendered unconditionally in May. Japan followed in August. The machinery of global conflict began the slow process of demobilization. Armin Faber, prisoner 847G Bede, was processed for repatriation at a transit camp near Southampton. The camp held 4,000 German POWs awaiting transport to occupation zones in Germany. The procedure was bureaucratic: medical screening, document verification, security clearance, assignment to repatriation transport. He had spent 2 years and 1 month in captivity. During that time, his world had been reduced to camp routines, censored correspondence, occasional news of Germany's deteriorating military situation. He learned of Germany's surrender through a camp announcement on May 8, 1945. The war was over. The Third Reich was destroyed. Millions were dead. His personal accounting was simpler. He had flown combat missions. He had survived a crash. He had been captured. He had answered questions. He had waited. What happened to his aircraft? The detailed examination, the technical intelligence extracted, the ways his one forced landing had contributed microscopic advantage to the Allied war effort, remained unknown to him. Prisoners received limited information about broader strategic developments. On September 17, 1945, Faber boarded a Liberty ship bound for Hamburg. The ship carried 823 repatriated prisoners. The voyage took 4 days. The sea was calm, the weather transitioning toward autumn. Germany, when he returned, was unrecognizable. Cities were rubble. Infrastructure was shattered. The population was traumatized and displaced. The occupation zones divided the country between Allied powers. Faber returned to a small town in Bavaria, where his family had evacuated during the strategic bombing campaigns. He never wanted fame. He never sought historical recognition. He had been a pilot, a soldier following orders within the structure of military duty. His capture had been circumstance, mechanical failure, perhaps navigation error, certainly not heroism or cowardice, but his small act of survival, his inability or unwillingness to destroy his aircraft before capture, had contributed one thread to the vast tapestry of intelligence that informed Allied victory. It was the way of war. Nothing was ever truly personal. Individual stories dissolved into aggregate statistics, operational summaries, archived reports. Faber's legacy was buried in the documentation of millions of other service members whose individual experiences, successes, failures, and sacrifices comprised the collective history. And yet, for one brief moment in August 1943, one aircraft had a different fate because of decisions made in seconds, decisions whose consequences rippled through strategic planning. For the remainder of the conflict, the file closed without comment. The numbers had already rewritten the war.